Okay, so now we're going to open the Q&A period, and we have questions in the chat as well as online. And so we were going to take 3 questions and then go back to the panel to answer, and you will have up to 5 minutes each to answer 1, 2, or 3 questions if we get 3. Okay, so the first question you will be answering is suppose that AI were able to do and make everything without workers. It's in the chat. You can read it as well. Everything without workers. The human population would then be out of work. Then how will humans pay for the things that the machines make under capitalism, that is? And if nobody can pay for anything, how would the capitalists make a profit? Okay, so now I'm going to go into my gallery and see whose hand is up. Okay, Kiri, go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Elizabeth. And my brain was tickling the whole time. Imogen, Gerard, and Michael Roberts. The topic is fascinating to me. Thank you so much for having this dialogue. I mean, bringing forward your best analysis forward. So yeah, I just wanted to stress on one more thing about the AI is that recently, last month actually, there was a startup that was called a Builder AI. That was the most valued startup in the history. They valued it almost $1.5 billion, and it was a UK startup, and it was an AI platform that made people who are not familiar with software, who cannot code, to make web publications. And guess what? All the big giants like Microsoft and all other big corporations, including banks, they were laying off workers because because they were crying they don't have money, but then they were investing in this AI startup. And this last month, that Builder AI collapsed. So based on that, I was going to say that the rise of AI is a suicide pursuit for greedy corporations and these big tech giants. But at the same time, like Gerard mentioned, that we also have to look at the aftermath, like the dot-com bubble. After that, the internet stayed with us. So yes, I think there's beneficial to it. But the question is, how can we make this AI more? How can we make it more favorable to workers? And what actions as socialists we need to do right now in order to make that favorable to humanity? Thank you.
See another question in the chat. Do I have somebody online that wants to ask the third question before we go to the panel? Go ahead, John Wilson. You're muted, John.
Yeah, I don't know if my experience reflects a function of AI, but it sure seems like it does. As people know, more and more corporations have no phone for customers to access. So if you want to ask a question or get technical help or something like that, you never get to talk to a human being. So what you got to do is phrase your question so the machine can answer it. Because if you don't, you won't get any answer, or you'll get something complete nonsense.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess I will go back to the panel. Then you have up to 5 minutes each to answer.
There's another question.
What you've heard. You have a question?
It's typed in the chat. It's in the chat.
Oh, well, I didn't see. Could you read it out then, please?
Yeah, very briefly. Given how far from actual workers' control humanity is today, should socialists mostly oppose artificial intelligence? Or would that be like being a latter-day Luddite?
Okay, panelists, so you've heard You have up to 5 minutes to answer, and we're going to start with Gerard, then Michael, then Imogen. Okay, so Gerard.
Okay, so for Carlos's question, I mean, it is a huge contradiction. What happens if you do have mass technological unemployment? I mean, that's also why a universal basic income is popular in some Silicon Valley circles, right? They think that they could somehow just keep the system going forever, even if people don't have jobs. I don't know. It's really sort of like uncharted territory in the way that we sort of think about things. And, you know, I mean, there's a lot of very pessimistic analysis out there, even if I don't necessarily always share it, about what are the consequences of this. I mean, in terms of humans paying for the machines that they make, I mean, I think that's sort of part of it and everything like that. So I mean, that when I do think about that, that is definitely some of the more like scary things about it. But sort of, and then I tie that into sort of what Kiri and Barry have said just about opposition and everything like that. I don't know how realistically you put a whole technology back in the bottle. That's never been done. I think so. I mean, it simply hasn't been done by anyone, whether it's even by other like businesses that like, we don't like this technology that our competitor has introduced. They can't, they have to eventually adopt it or go out of business. I think though there is, because of how like right now at our specific moment, instead of something more generalizable, I would say Silicon Valley has certainly hurt its standing among the public because of how much they've flirted with Trump. So I think if, you know, you basically in terms of, you know, opposing it, you've got to go straight for this, sort of tie them into the far right and what Trump is up to and all these other far right types. And also when it comes to simply, you know, like, can you just completely oppose AI? No, but you have to start like a more clear public movement against AI. You have to enlist the labor movement and other social movements to help you. I think that's sort of the way forward on resistance. And I think there's actually an opening right now that would be very different if Trump wasn't the president, actually.
Michael?
Well, let's take it from a theoretical point of view. The question has been raised. It's a hypothetical one. What if AI replaces all labor and there's only machines? What does that mean for the economy? Well, if Marxist theory is correct, and only value is created by labor and not by anything else, and therefore profit comes from the exploitation of labor, if labor isn't being applied, we don't have a capitalist system. It's not capitalism anymore. It's some other system. It's a slave system, really. It's basically the machines are slaves, and the rest of us are sitting around wondering where we're going to get the next piece of bread. That's the result of that. But it's not capitalism anymore because there's no profit being made out of the exploitation of labor. There's simply machines acting as slaves like we had, if you like, in slave economies before. But having said that, this is a hypothetical thing which is not going to happen because, first of all, I can't see any way in which labor disappears from the process of production at all, even with AI. Let me give you the example of Builder.com, which Kelly mentioned. This is a British startup company which was supposedly with huge amounts of money invested by Microsoft, by Amazon, by Qatar, in order to create apps all produced by AI, not using workers at all. That was supposedly the model which Builder.com. We've now found out from this scam, it's a complete scam and scandal, that actually it was all being done by 700 Indian workers who were producing all the code manually. So labor was being used. There was no AI in any sense of the term. It was a complete scam. But it was believed that it was possible, and this is what was happening, that the company was going to produce all the things, the apps and the programs that people needed without using human labor whatsoever. What a load of nonsense. It's not possible. Even every development that's been taking place in AI still requires the ingenuity of knowledge and human intelligence to make that work, to train the machines, to make them better and more effective and less hallucinating. But it's not going to transform and remove the forces of labor. Even if AI was to make a certain area totally free of human labor, huge amounts of human labor will be used in other areas. And to create AI, we have to have huge data banks, battery machines, massive expenditures going on in producing these data centers. Are they built by nobody? Of course they're not. They're not built by machines. They're built by workers using machines, but human labor is still going to be playing a massive role for the foreseeable future in our economies and society. It's inconceivable to have a machine world, and that's not going to happen. And what it does, though, is the massive increase in investment in mechanization in AI relative to labor, which Gerard has already pointed out is the process that's taking place, is going to increase the intensive problem that capitalism has of a tendency for the profitability of that capital to fall over time. It's going to intensify crises. So even before we get to the point where, which is not going to happen, but even we got to this singularity where there's no labor being employed at all, we would have massive series of crises under capitalism, which create the conditions where workers would either have to take action to take control of the machinery, take control of the means of production, or we will be placed in a position where they'd be reduced to the level of slavery. I'll finish on this point, that we're not opposed to technology, are we, as socialists? We want to increase the ability of reducing the time that people have to spend in toil and to make a living to the minimum, so that they can spend more and more time to do the things that creatively will cooperate with other people in creatively developing our consciousness, our knowledge, and a better life. That is what the productivity of labor aims to do, and that's what machines should be doing. But we don't control those machines. Those machines are under the control of the owners of the means of production. We have to reverse that process. That's the key question. It's not paying people an income to do nothing. Universal basic income is taking control of the means of production so that we can organize it on a planned basis for everybody.
Thank you, Michael. Imogen?
Yeah, I think Michael really well answered the question of full automation. I don't feel like I have anything to add on that. To John's bit of commentary about AI customer service. Yeah, like I pointed out in my talk, that's a really great point. One of the ways in which AI makes the consumer experience or the worker's experience of the world worse is outsourcing labor to the consumer, like is being described. It's making a device that can perform the job a human can do, but it does it worse and in such a way that the consumer of that service has to like hold the hand of the thing that's supposed to be helping them, right? As for should we oppose the development of AI and how do we protect ourselves? The opposing the development, I think, is the wrong question. What we need to be talking about is regulation, right? AI does have its applications. Like we said, AlphaFold has been a huge leap forward in biomedicine. Now, this is an application where it's not replacing anyone's labor. It's performing a task that was previously impossible because it requires a kind of calculation that humans cannot perform ourselves. There are other things that it's good at, right? We've talked about like how it's very useful in coding. When I say AI sucks, that's a generalization. There are some things that it's good at. One of those things is stealing people's voices. This is one of the things that film actors striked over recently. Or in the past couple of years, was that recordings of people's voices could be used to then synthesize their voices, deepfakes, exactly, to produce performances virtually. And that's an instance where, like as an actor, I can say you're never going to get the same quality of performance from an algorithm that you're going to get from a person. However, it's so much cheaper that film studios are going to do it anyway. So in applications like that, or just on the grounds that introduction of AI is going to be used to weaken labor's bargaining position. It's going to be used as a threat to replace workers more than it's actually going to be able to. Or it's going to be used as a threat for like reducing hours. So how do we oppose it? We make it a priority in our unions on the grounds of the ethical question that it is, a machine that's built on slavery and theft and exploitation and resource extraction. We need to advocate for regulation and legislation that controls how AI can be used in the modern economy because, it can't be put back in the bottle, and we need to act fast to make sure that we limit the ways in which it can be used against us.
Thank you, Imogen. Okay, I see no questions in the chat. I see no hands up. So, folks, now is your chance.
Yeah, I have a question.
Who am I speaking to?
It's Emily.
Oh, sorry, Emily. Okay, yes, go ahead.
So I also wanted to add something about deep fakes. So like as Imogen was just saying, and like this is something I think about a lot as like a musician, and it's something a lot of my peers and colleagues are very concerned with, is like the not just the theft of our labor, but the theft of our identity and the theft of our autonomy, in quite a literal way. But also, this also begs the question of like propaganda, because on one hand, like you can now generate a video of Trump or Vladimir Putin saying whatever you want, but conversely, you can generate video of any political leader doing anything. So how do we do what is this going to mean for propaganda, and how do we tell truth when there is no way of demonstrating truth in the age of like anything can be just generated? I don't know if I phrased that, but I think you know what I mean.
Okay, Emily, thank you very much. The second question that will go to the panel, Julius.
Yeah, great presentations again. It's hard to ask a question because these presentations are filled with so much information that when you're about to, you think of a question, you get the answer. So great work, everybody. It's more of a comment maybe. I find that this perspective is very interesting as what I'm hearing essentially runs very counter to what is taking place, in in the podcast sphere online. There, especially as of late, there seems to be a real focus on this potential crisis of AI, particularly around the possibility of a superintelligence, and how dangerous that could be to humanity, kind of going to what the speaker said about, it being the end of capitalism. There have been some folks who have basically said that if we were actually able to create a superintelligence, that it would be the end of us. Not because necessarily we would become the enemy of the superintelligence, but simply that we would just get in the way. But I really appreciate what Imogen had to say in terms of the hype that seems to be built up around this idea, and that the hype, even perhaps the negative hype, is designed to bring attention and money and investment into the AI sphere. So I just appreciate these perspectives quite a bit, and I think that it's a narrative that needs to be heard more often. Thank you.
Okay, JC, your question?
It might be a bit of both comment and a question, but I've been noticing in a lot of spheres like Windows 11 and the integration of AI into these systems like smartphones, tablets, video game systems even sometimes. I don't know if the book AI Empire talked about it because Imogen didn't get to this, but data collection, where the AI are so integrated that they can create databases based on our information. And I'm actually worried about the algorithms making it possible for more police state. So, like I mentioned in the chat, Palantir, a tech company in the States, wants to actually create a database of people for that purpose. Anyone can speak about that, maybe? I know that is not economics and really economics based is more tech based, but just maybe some more perspective.
Okay, so I just got one more hand up, so I'm going to go to that person, get the last question, and then come back to the panel, and they have up to 7 minutes to answer that, or if they, don't want to answer some of the questions, maybe they have some last words for us on their own. So I'm going to go to Gary and then come back to the panel.
Okay, I just had a couple of thoughts. I think the question of organic intelligence, that the kind we have, is not even understood. I mean, how can we replicate it, as Imogen said, when neuroscientists and biologists are still trying to figure it out and are not very far in terms of figuring it out? So, I mean, we don't know when you're trying to do it through coding. You don't know how close you are because you don't understand the kind of intelligence that you're trying to replicate. So that's one thing. I mean, we're just so far behind in terms of even understanding how our intelligence works. I see that Musk is trying to make sure that consciousness survives by trying to set up a colony on Mars, which is the stupidest idea that I can think of. If we could terraform Mars, let's try it on Earth. The second point is I remember sitting in high school and being told that automation would be a problem for me in my life. That was in about 1852. I mean, well, it wasn't exactly. It was 1950s and 60s that I was in high school. I think I started university in 1962. So, and we were being told all our lives that automation was going to kill all kinds of jobs. There was going to be mass unemployment, and unemployment has remained about the same over that whole time. What has been true is that the level of education required or technical knowledge required in order to do those jobs has risen. And so people have to spend more time at school. They have to spend more time, particularly in colleges where they learn skills. So, I mean, I've lived, the 80 years of my life have indicated to me that all this stuff is stuff of the chattering classes where they like to turn these things into big topics and big discussion and that sort of thing. But we all have a way of adapting to these things, and they evolve new areas. I mean, some of the areas, buggy whips disappeared, but the making of cell phones more than replaced it. Things evolve, and I'm not quite as stampeded by these
Please wrap
discussions
up.
of tech fear as I once was.
Okay, so I see one more end, and most of it has been questions. I mean, comments, I think. So I'm going to take ons for 2 minutes, but then we're closed. Any hands go up, I'm sorry, I can't accept them anymore. So Ange, you have 2 minutes, and then I'll go back to the panel for sure.
Well, in the 70s, I programmed a transaction that ran 1 million times a day in a banking system. In the 80s, I worked for Intel as a sales rep in field engineering in Canada, and I saw robots building robots. And I worked peripherally in the mining sector, where we saw unions of 18,000 workers being decimated to 3,000 people. One of the major components in the embattling of the working class has been automation. Peripherally, I might add that Stalin forbade this study of cybernetics, leaving the Soviet Union in arrears on that. An algorithm is by definition the condensation of someone's thought, of a thought process, of a preordained human implementation. Now, I have not read up on the latest literature of AI. I think it's a continuation on the management suite, primarily of intimidation of labor. And it has taken a great deal of hold among the labor bureaucracy. Regulating the utility function of what we're using right now, Zoom and other utilities like it, is a task of the left. It is a task that I think is emerging more and more as more and more fiascos come to bear, more scams come to bear, as more idiots like Elon Musk are being exposed. And what is it? Cory Doctorow made it through to CBC, the enshittification of the internet. I think we should take courage from that, even as we recognize that, yes, the fundamental theory of labor, I'm not so sure. I mean, I've seen a lot of labor replicated by automation at a scale that it must be profitable. Look at an ATM, a bank machine, and how few tellers we have today. Mike, 2 bits worth.
Grocery stores, how many clerks we have serving us. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the panel, and you have up to 7 minutes to answer anything you've heard or speak to anything you've heard in the last little while. And I'm going to start with Imogen, then Gerard, and then Michael. Go ahead, Imogen.
Right. Okay, I'm going to address these, I think, in sort of reverse order of how we talked about them, because that's how much I have to say. As for what Gary was talking about with unemployment staying about the same, but requirements for technical knowledge increasing, I think this is sort of a real world application of like Marxist alienation from labor, right? Labor is becoming more and more abstract and removed from the creation of the actual products that are useful in the economy. And we should keep in mind that the changing nature of work, right? If an industry of people lose their jobs and all of them find new jobs, that is still oppressing workers. That's keeping them in low-level positions. That's forcing them to change industries in such a way that they are not able to like gain expertise and gain seniority. As for Elon Musk's ambitions, I think we should, remember, aside from the fact that he's a horrible person, he's a transphobe, and a bigot, and an advocate of white genocide, we should also remember that his actual ambitions for Martian colonization is to allow workers to travel to Mars basically for free and then be indebted to his company when they get there, which will be the only system of governance that exists in a Martian colony. So he wants to be a king, literally, and he's not shy about that, but we need to remember that that's actually his ambition here. Speaking to the forced integration of AI into everyday software, the reason this is happening is because no one wants to use AI, right? It only has those 200 million monthly users, so they're jamming it into everything that they can, hoping that someone will use it once and say, oh, this is interesting, and start paying for a subscription model, even if they don't actually use it. Speaking to Palantir and the aggregation of databases, AI has access to way more of your data than it lets on already. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Palantir, I'm glad that they got in public trouble for their proposal to aggregate a bunch of US information databases. But like the further we move down the line, that's probably going to happen. There was a story this past week out of the US of someone who was arrested for a crime because he was the person listed in a data. He was a database match, even though he was arrested by the FBI for a train bombing in Spain when he'd never been to Spain because his like genetic profile or whatever that was listed in a database was listed wrong. So that's going to keep happening. There's a book called The Trial by Franz Kafka about a person who is arrested by the state and taken through the series of trials and never informed of what crime he's committed until the end when he's executed and still doesn't know. And I think that's a very prevalent piece of art in this conversation. As for propaganda and identity theft, Emily, I'm so glad that you brought that up. That's one of the things I didn't get to talk about because with deepfakes, we're also looking at like deepfake pornography, right? The unconsensual use of women's bodies and persons to create these like pieces of sexual content against our will, and it's happening now. Deepfake laws do exist and are becoming more popular, but the dark web exists, and in the context of propaganda, yeah, you can make a video of Trump saying anything you want, and even if there's a deepfake law that prohibits that, censorship still takes time. It can still get on the internet and go viral before it gets censored and taken down when someone realizes it's a deepfake. So yeah, that's one of the most terrifying applications of it, is the sort of social engineering possibility that deepfakes have. And yeah, the ability to sort of like steal artists' identities. We saw this in the Studio Ghibli photo filter trend, where the actual artist they were imitating was deeply fundamentally opposed to the technology being used. Anyway.
Thank you, and Gerard.
I'll start off with deep fakes as well. I mean, it is a very scary technology. I don't have any like particularly interesting, I suppose, answers. I think one of the things is that, it is also a question of media literacy, which is already in a weakened state, right? Even before the deep fake phenomenon, people were sharing all sorts of things on social media that were clear misinformation of all sorts of different types, right? And there's also the question of like, there's some contradictions there because to protect individuals from deepfakes, and I have no debate about that. There's also sort of like you could fall into a very legalistic strategy, and like sort of everybody is a copyright of themselves too. That might have to be the way we go, but I think there's sort of like more interesting philosophical questions about this how to sort of pursue. But at the same time, like this could become a problem very fast. So whatever quick solutions might be very necessary. So I think that's something that is a longer discussion. In terms of sort of the discourse about, I think what Julius was talking about, I think that different people in different regions and different experiences are going to have more sort of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, apocalyptic ideas. If you live somewhere that's already been decimated by deindustrialization or something like that, the tone may be very different if you're like a middle-class professional, that AI can help be like, oh, I can do a little more work, right? Even there's been country studies, and different countries have different levels of concern about of what technology is going to do and about fears of job loss in technology. And I don't think it's particularly surprising that in the United States, it's one of the most concerned countries in the world about the consequences of what technology is going to do to the job market. In terms of security state and data, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, when you are on Facebook and you're clicking things, you are basically you're adding value to Mark Zuckerberg and all the other Facebook shareholders, right? Because they are mining that data, and data has become a very valuable commodity. Now, in terms of the question of what's happening with Palantir and data surveillance, it's very scary, but also I think, again, it's sort of this arrogance from the Silicon Valley and the tech types, especially tying themselves so closely with Trump. Like I said before, if we're concerned about AI, we can definitely turn this and be like, we can't have unregulated AI, and we also can't have all of these companies running around and collecting our data for all of these security state purposes. So I think there's something to be tied together there to sort of as sort of like a basis for a way to push back against AI and push back against increasing securitization. And one thing I'll add quickly to the question of education and jobs, there's also been a clear inflation of credentialism. Like, you need now like a master's to get an entry-level position that was once a BA, that was once, just finishing high school. So that's something that, and I think that just adds to labor market competitiveness, and students are saddled with student debt. So I think it is in some ways has become a sort of almost like a way of pacification in a certain way, and just try to channel people to be more competitive among themselves. Because like, well, if I don't get this education, I'm not going to get this kind of job, because, good jobs that don't require anything beyond a high school diploma are shrinking rapidly. And so that's something that I think that just adds to all sorts of, corrosive competition in the labor market.
Okay, thank you, Gerard. Michael?
Well, I think what somebody said about the podcasts presenting, either you get one extreme, you can either get podcasts saying that this technology is fantastic, it's going to change the world, and we need to embrace it to its fullest, and AI is going to transform everybody's lives. And then you get the other podcast which says that it's going to be a disaster and we're all going to be annihilated. I don't think either of those is correct. Both have elements of truth in them, but they both have an incorrect view about the way in which machines, which AI is the latest development, play a role in our society. As far as I'm concerned, for humanity in general, machines should be there to reduce the toil and labor that human beings have got, so they can spend more time on their creative activities, and to do so. But that means the control and ownership and the planning of those machines. At the moment, under capitalist society, machines are being used to dominate people's lives and their workplaces and their levels of toil and what they get paid for it, because it's controlled by a small number of people. One of the things about the development of automation has not been, as what somebody said, simply a reduction in employment, or certainly been a big fall in manufacturing employment, but there's been a rise in employment in other areas. There has been a big increase in inequalities of wealth and income as a result of the process of machines being controlled by a small ownership who run that and run it for their benefit, for their profit, and not for the rest of society. When you take Musk, for example, you might call him the huge techno-optimist. He thinks machines are everything. That's because he has no empathy with human beings whatsoever. He thinks human beings aren't necessary, apart from himself, presumably. I think he actually wants to convert himself into a non-human being, a machine eventually. But that sort of lack of empathy with humanity is actually a very close equivalent to what fascism is. I mean, fascism is a lack of empathy with any humanity. It's in favor of genocide, the crushing of anything. And these sorts of people are dominating the sectors of the economy which threaten our futures in general. But let me put it this way, and I think Imogen's done a very good job in explaining that AI is not going to transform the world. It's not going to replace humanity. It's not going to replace human intelligence, not only because nobody really knows exactly what human intelligence is, but also the idea of generalized intelligence, which is presented by the likes of Sam Altman and others, is just nonsense. They have nowhere near getting to the position where they could achieve a replacement of human intelligence. Are they really suggesting to us, I think Imogen used the word, there's God in this, that they're going to replace Shakespeare, they're going to replace Einstein's thought process? Anybody who has read how Einstein came up with this theory knows it's not done by regurgitating everything that was done before, which is what AI does badly, but it's done by having a thought process and imagination of leaping forward to a hypothetical situation, which is then tested by experience. Humanity, human intelligence can do that. No machine can do that. No AI will be able to do that. And that's the real blockage in front of them. Just finally, also, in terms of profitability, AI is increasingly going to be unprofitable. I mean, it's not profitable in any of the startups at the moment. And even if it becomes profitable in certain areas, it's going to be very limited, particularly because, unfortunately, for the proprietary owners of ChatGPT and the others, there's open AI and there's very cheap machine learning processes now, like DeepSeek. French have got an alternative language learning machine, which costs tuppence. You can put it on your computer now for virtually nothing. And if you really want to use AI all the time, you won't need to use ChatGPT at $200 or $300 a month. They're already in deep trouble when it comes to the question of the spread of this technology. It's not under their control even. So I think we have to take a view that this is not utopia, but it's also not dystopia. There's still every power for us on the labour movement to intervene and take control of the development of this machinery and other machinery. But the key question, I finished, the key question is who owns and controls the means of production. That's the key question. While that remains in the hands of a very small number of people, we face the continual problem of dealing with change as it comes that won't benefit the labour movement. Until we control and own the means of production and can plan it globally as well, then this situation will continue, the struggle between those who own and those who don't own.
Okay, thank you. A very special thank you to all our panelists, Imogen, Gerard, and Michael. A very, very educational forum. I sorely enjoyed it, and I learned a lot about AI, that's for sure. So our next session is Organizing for Radical Change in Canada. And the speakers will be Tom Baker from Hamilton, Carl Trolio, who lives in Canada now, but is from the Philippines. And of course, Helen Smith from Vancouver. And Emily Sears will be back to sing another song. So this session starts at 7. Now we've had practice for 2 sessions, so let's be on time for this one. Okay, so see you all at 7.